Hello and welcome to the 6th A4E Aviation Summit. My name's Graham Dunn, I'm Executive Editor at Flight Global, and at Flight Global we're absolutely delighted to be working with A4E again on the summit, here in person. I'll be your chair today, which means I'll be popping up at various points, navigating you through the program. As a general rule, if you see me, that means something is about to happen or someone more interesting is about to come on. So that's the key thing. Then we'll try and keep things as to time as best you can. Very simple housekeeping rules. Please keep your phones on silent if you can during the sessions. There are no fire drills planned. So if the fire alarm goes, please make your way through the exits, which are just over there. I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors for their support on the summit, to Airbus, ABP, Boeing, GE Aviation, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, Embraer, BOC Aviation, and Panasonic. It's really appreciated. And without further ado, I'd like to kick things off. And before I bring on A4E Managing Director Thomas Reynaert, we're going to have a quick introductory video.
Welcome aboard indeed. Again, it's good to see so many familiar faces, but also some new faces. It's been too long that we haven't met in person, face to face, you know, just to see each other. At yesterday's dinner, that was quite clear. People enjoyed it a lot. It's nice to recognize faces, actually, when you take the mask off. Oh, it was you. I didn't recognize you. So welcome back. Welcome back to our esteemed guests and our dear friends. And thanks to Flight Global again. It's good to be back with you guys in Brussels, and our wonderful sponsors, without whom support this event would simply not have taken place. I will take you quickly, 5-10 minutes or so, probably more 10 minutes, through my introductory remarks. Let me start with the first one. The first one is the slide we don't like to show, but we have to show. So we're always comparing ourselves with 2019 and with 21, the latest numbers. There were some improvements in 21 compared to 2020. Well, it couldn't have gotten any worse, really. But it's still not very good. So, as we all know by now, European airlines have been the worst affected crisis in the worst affected region under COVID-19. Compared to 2019, A4E members, A4E Airlines lost almost 500 million passengers. That's huge. If you look at where we come from, more than 700 million passengers in 2019, which of course was an okay year. But also our airlines are operating with 150,000 staff less than in 2019. Very highly skilled people, and as Carsten mentioned earlier this morning, it's going to be a challenge to get these people back, because we need them back once we start flying them again. But fleet sizes have also been affected. Of course, this is what happens in such a crisis when borders are being closed, when governments tell you that you can no longer fly. And of course, yeah, you have to park aircraft, you have to cancel some deliveries. But luckily enough, not all of the airlines have done that. Some have had to do that because of restructuring efforts, but others have kept their delivery schedules intact. And I'm sure some of the OEMs here, like Boeing and Airbus, will be happy about that. But that shows again that fleet modernization is not just a one-thing off. It's something which we continuously need to do in optimizing not only the OPEX, fuel burn, but of course also it's good for CO2 emissions. Following the global pandemic, we had hoped for a more stable situation, to be honest. In the beginning of the year, I think we were quite optimistic. We were looking at summer bookings, really looking good. And we had hopes, I would say, towards the end of January and beginning of February of the Omicron variant, obviously, being aggressive, but not making people that sick. So in terms of travel restrictions or easing them, we were quite optimistic. However, we all know what happened a bit more than a month ago now. Mr. Putin decided to invade Ukraine with all these disastrous results. And mainly I would think of the humanitarian impact, first of all, which were really catastrophic. And our thoughts and our solidarity continue to be with the courageous Ukrainian people. We have seen almost 4 million refugees, people fleeing from the Ukraine today. And that may continue, unfortunately, as a situation we know today. A4E airlines work with national governments in order to get the refugees in a safe manner as soon as possible out of the country. But our airlines have also done many other things, such as special humanitarian fares for those people, working with organizations such as the UNHCR, UNICEF, for aid, but also to provide safe flights for refugees, and also dedicated cargo flights, not to forget, carrying humanitarian supplies at free or at reduced rates. So the situation is obviously awful, what's happening in Ukraine, and we don't have a lot of hopes of having a resolution short-term for peace, but we need peace and stability as soon as possible. So the crisis, what does this mean? What's happening now more widely for European airlines? The first thing is quite obvious. Let's look at airspace. The closures we already had the closure of the Belarus airspace, remember, and then on top of that, closure of Ukraine and Russian airspace. This has an impact on European traffic, mostly on traffic, if you would ask Eurocontrol, of course, bordering Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. But of course, for many airlines, this means longer flights for travel to and from Asia, longer flights with longer routes, more fuel burn, and higher CO2 emissions. There's also an impact, let's not forget. Some people may think it's a detail, but when you talk to the OEMs, it is actually much better of a deal. So going forward, there is also disruption, as we speak, in the global aerospace supply chain. So think of MRO, but also the building of new aircraft. So that is not good news. Another impact that we have seen is slots. Slots has become a very, I would say, trendy, for obvious reasons, issue since COVID-19, but also the closure and the sanctions to Russia, and the fact that the European Union is taking, for understandable reasons, a very strict view on the sanctions towards Russia. That could actually also have an impact as a risk that fires back to the European carriers having slots in Russia. This could also have an effect beyond the crisis. So we don't really know how the Russian regime, suppose we would have peace, stabilization, will those slots become available again quickly to our European carriers? Another painful but obvious one is inflation, and the rate energy prices are going up, of course, play a very important role in this inflation. In Europe, we have between 6 and 7, well, 6.5%. Last time I looked in the EU, 6.5% inflation rate. In a country like Belgium, that's easily, the real inflation is really between 12 and 13%. So obviously, this will have an impact, as Carsten mentioned this morning, on all of us, not only in our sector, but of course on the cost of living overall. Now, the oil prices, which is directly affecting us as airlines, you know that up to a third of the cost can come from fuel, and I don't have to explain to you what this means for the cost and the operation of aircraft, knowing that the oil price at the moment is at a 14-year record high. Energy security concerns, of course, also speeding up and developing of fuels in Europe, and that's for some people maybe a positive, but fuel development in Europe is becoming a priority. But at the same time, we've talked about SAFs, at the same time the price of feedstock used for SAF production will increase as well. And I would say maybe the last risk we see is inbound tourism. The tourism sector, in which air travel plays a very important role, has been suffering a lot since COVID-19. Again, I don't have to explain you why. Lack of consumer confidence, and honestly, with borders being closed, making it very difficult for people to travel from third countries for a number of reasons. That's not been great for European tourism. Now, with the war, things are certainly not improving that situation. We know that, for instance, North American, not only, but including North American tourists are very sensitive to situations like wars, especially if they take place very close in Europe. So, what does this mean for A4E? In the context of the consecutive crises, COVID-19, now we have the war in Ukraine. First of all, no surprise, single European sky. Why single European sky? Well, the whole context of single European sky needs to be also assessed in the crisis that we are just experiencing. The need for a single European sky is there now more than ever. And we do not understand, frankly, why the current presidency, and we hope for the next presidency to make single European sky a real priority. Again, the crisis really shows this. A reformed, a more efficient ATM will simply make the single market much more robust for future shocks and future waves of crisis. God forbid they don't come, but we need to be ready for that. And we believe that all the parties in the trilogue here in Brussels discussing CES2+, the Council, the Parliament and the Commission really need to get their act together in a sense. Let's move forward as quickly as we can. And again, we're looking to the Czech presidency to make the big difference there and the progress, hopefully still before the end of this year. Decarbonization, of course, this is a priority for us, will continue to be a priority. Fit for 55 is really hot, as discussions are going on a lot in the European Parliament, but of course between Council and Commission, those discussions continue. The big ask that we would add as A4E onto a Fit for 55, or as we've done before, is really the international aspect of decarbonization and the role of ICAO and the role of Europe it should play in international climate diplomacy, i.e. at the level of ICAO, the General Assembly. We believe that Europe is not doing enough. Europe is very engaged, committed, and extremely ambitious when it comes to reducing CO2 emissions in Europe, but what is the rest of the world doing? So we need to have a level playing field, not only politically, but also at the end of the day, who is going to pay for the decarbonization? Is it only going to be European aviation? I hope not. And this is why we are looking for ICAO to really come up with a solution, a global carbon pricing system and decarbonization targets. The ICAO General Assembly for us later this year is an opportunity also to have progress on a global sustainable aviation fuel mandate. And last but not least, EU26 reform. It is the ask for reform. We've been asking it for quite a long time. Again, the consecutive crisis the last 2 years we've seen is, again, it shows that EU261 was not fit for purpose. It does not take into realities as we have them today. So we need to get through this reform as soon as possible. Again, looking at the Czech presidency, the second half of the year, realistically, to make progress on this file together with CES2+. I would say then maybe in summary is that this is a time for policymakers to reassess the key aviation proposals this year, taking into account the new realities, the situation that we are in today, including, as I mentioned, high inflation, impact of the war on consumer confidence in air travel, looming travel restrictions, because let's not forget, COVID-19 is not away yet. It may just come back with another variant later this year. Convincing passengers also that flying sustainably is possible today, and so it is okay to fly. People don't have to feel bad about flying, or obviously always willing to, or having to, wanting the need to take the train. Flying also short haul is fine. We can do it in a sustainable manner. What we don't need, and this is where I'll end in my summary, is Unfortunately, the country where I live in and I'm a citizen of is Belgium has decided to introduce a departure tax of €10 per ticket from the flights leaving from Brussels, from Belgium as of tomorrow. So governments do not learn. Obviously, this tax is just a tax like another tax. It's simply made for the revenue. There's no environmental rationale at all. Belgian government needs money, and so they attack an easy target. In closing, it's clear that following the successive crises, 2020 and today, governments will play a more important role in directing airline strategies, and we know this very well. And this is why we're also happy to have so many people also from the Commission and EU officials here in the room today. It is an opportunity, I think, to work for A4E, to work even closer with the EU and government officials to make sure we can build our sector better and that we have a fresh look at the European regulation, which is currently on the table, to make sure that airlines can continue to thrive in a healthy, competitive market, making sure that people can continue to fly at affordable prices and ensuring connectivity. Because let's not forget that the single aviation market, one of its main successes is affordable fares and great connectivity. So really let's try to get back to that, but put some realism into the discussions about regulation in taking into account the context of the last 2 years and unfortunately still today's context. Thank you very much. Graham, back to you.